Ok, pessoal. Como eu havia dito, nós preparamos uma sessão de perguntas e respostas no formato de round table, e nós já coletamos perguntas que vieram de todos vocês, fizemos aqui uma seleção. A primeira delas, e perguntas que, obviamente, estão associadas a todos os painéis que vocês presenciaram aqui hoje. A primeira delas vai para Michela. Michela,
Oi, Durval.
quais as principais mudanças no que se refere a royalties após a MP 1152? Não há mais limite de dedutibilidade para o IRPJ?
Bom, mudanças que o royalties agora foram abarcados pela análise de preço de transferência. Então, aqueles limites percentuais que existiam não mais valerão, e a análise da dedutibilidade de royalty ela vai ter que ser feita à luz das regras de preço de transferência. Cautela e atenção, é claro, deve ser dada para aquelas situações de pagamentos de royalties a paraísos, a jurisdições com tributação favorecida ou regime fiscal privilegiado, e também aqueles pagamentos que a medida provisória prevê a partes relacionadas em situações de dupla não tributação, na qual, de fato, isso é um ponto de atenção aí, porque a normativa determina pela não dedutibilidade. Então, essas são situações que devem ser avaliadas com muito carinho, com muito cuidado, frente às operações de royalties a partir de agora.
Ok. Agora, I have a question for Horácio. Well, Horácio, with all, these changes, will the introduction of the new business model, because of all the changes, trigger business disruptions? I'm going to add another question. I'm going to tag another question to that one. So, will the introduction of the new business model trigger business disruption? And what is the right time to begin the analysis, in order to be read about all these changes?
What's the right
Time.
I mean, it's an excellent question. I think one of the interesting things about the challenges that civilization is facing, right, is that there's nothing like a deadline and a massive challenge like COVID to really unleash the power of ingenuity and innovation models. So to answer your question, no, there will be no interruption. Because if not even COVID can interrupt, all the things we've seen, how incredible agile companies, even the most rigid companies, had to pivot in the last 2 or 3 years to really unleash these operating models, use technology different ways, accommodate their people, create new supply chains from scratch. And we have done it at record speeds. So the answer is no, there will be no business interruption. So that's good. The bad part is the taxes, the institutions, the laws are very slow to change and much more, but not at the same speed as the business operating models. Therefore, we will need us in this room to manage that transition in an extremely careful way. So in other ways, we're going to have 3 systems at the same time. You're going to have the Brazilian income tax laws from the past. You're operating right now. We're already in March, and we're still working with those. You need to quickly assess. It's not going to be perfect. We're the enemy of the perfect. We're the friends of the practical. We need to get it done fast and correctly to understand those options that Matthias and Yvonne were talking about before, to quickly decide. And we don't have to do everything. We just have to collect enough information, and as Romero said, to bring it to the stakeholders, the management team. Even in some of these case situations, the boards are going to have to want to know what's going on, tell us what it means for the future of the company, how we're going to operate. But absolutely right, Durval, we have to be careful not to deliver that message, that taxes should not get in the way of interrupting business. But yes, for sure, we will have to carefully manage the transition, because the exit taxes, the transaction taxes, IP valuation transfers, and all these things could have huge, number one tax issue in the world for the last many years has been transfer pricing. The biggest tax cases in the world have been transfer pricing. The biggest areas of double taxation has been transfer pricing. But also the most value has been created by transfer pricing. So as part of it is we need to manage that transition very well. And if we do it right, then we will be migrating to evolve to a much more efficient market-based operating system, great opportunities for our people, great opportunities for innovation technology, with zero disruption for business, hopefully.
If I can add one thing on
Please.
that, on timing, it's the sooner the better. And the reason I'm saying that is the sooner that we can collect this information that we are discussing, having more information available, you will be able to have a more robust and informed decision. Why? Because we have eventually a first quote-unquote deadline, if you will, would be September. September is around the corner. So do we need to do everything today? No, but at least to explore the options, because we might potentially have a need to opt in, or not, but in 6 months.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. Ivan, given all your background, this is mine. This is not in the question. But given all your background, what is required to become a member of the OECD? Is adhering the arm's length principle enough for that?
Well, it's true that... You can hear me? Yeah? Okay. So back in 2017, what happened is that Brazil sent a letter to the OECD with the petition to be considered a potential member of the OECD. And that's not even case, that's not even case 1. We're like in -2. So what happened is that after that, all of this assessment was conducted, and as Romero did mention in his presentation, we conducted an analysis to figure out, maybe going back to that. In order to become a member, you need to adhere to certain principles that the OECD has. One of them is the arm's length standard. And the truth is that Brazil already adheres to most of these principles, except for the arm's length standard. That's why we started off exactly with the one in which Brazil did not adhere to. So that's why the analysis was conducted. It was a very interesting discussion between OECD, between Receita Federal, between also with the business community, in order to figure out whether there was really a necessity to adhere completely to the arm's length standard, or whether you could keep some type of local regulations that would somehow not get in the way with adhering to the arm's length principle. That's what the analysis was about since 2017 to 2020, when really things started to happen. So today what we have is that Brazil, if it is confirmed, will adhere to this arm's length standard completely. There was some negotiations at the beginning to see whether you could just adhere little by little, step by step. Apparently this is going to be a complete adoption, but this is not it. This is just adhering to the principles, so OECD will tick the box on, okay, they've adhered to the arm's length standard, and this is important because the truth is that Brazil has already been in the OECD for quite some time as a strategic partner, so even though it's not a member, it's contributing constantly to the different working parties of the OECD. So it's going to be a long journey. It can take some time. There's other countries who have started, for example, like Colombia, who has taken some time, and so on. Lithuania maybe was a quicker one. Of course, the size of the country also enables it to be quicker. But the truth is that we're still not there. There's also some political considerations that need to be aligned in order for Brazil to be part of the OECD.
Thank you so much. Romero, sobre os foreign tax credits de empresas nos Estados Unidos, com multinacionais aqui no Brasil, haverá mudanças após a MP 1152?
Ela ajuda. Isso foi mencionado brevemente pelo Horácio, e é fato. A gente tem, por não termos um tratado com os Estados Unidos, a gente é sujeito a uma análise adicional que não se aplica para quase nenhum outro grande parceiro dos Estados Unidos, de legislação interna, configuração de base de cálculo, cost recovery, revenue, etc., gross receipts, tudo mais. Essa análise ela não é fácil, ela tem riscos, mas a nossa conclusão é que o Brasil, more likely than not, passa por esse teste. Aonde o Brasil não passa por esse teste, para os seus resident-based taxes, o IRPJ e ACS, era justamente no attribution rule do não conformidade com Arm's Length Standard. Então, para o IRPJ e para a ACS, more likely than not, elas são impostos de renda, classificáveis como tal, e agora, com essa regra, esses impostos de renda passariam a ser creditáveis, sim, se a gente realmente materializar essa conversão em lei. Salientando que isso não interfere, não ajuda na análise do IR-fonte, por exemplo, que o IR-fonte dos royalties teve uma facilitação dada pelo Tesouro Americano que resolve um problema brasileiro. Isso foi fato, inclusive, eu acredito que também graças ao trabalho da AmCham, mas quanto aos royalties sobre serviço, a gente continua tendo problema. Então, mesmo com essa mudança, continua não sendo creditável o IR-fonte sobre as remessas referentes a serviços. Mas, pelo menos, o IRPJ e a CS, o problema de transfer pricing, que era gigante, esse aí está sendo resolvido.
Obrigado, Romero. Matias, will the tax function now be required to talk more to the operations, finance, and strategic team in view of the new rules?
Yes, but it should have been in the past as well. We had a number of cases where the tax function learned of significant changes after the fact, and a lot of pitfalls happened because of the fact that we were not, or the tax function was not involved. What we are seeing now is, with all these changes in digitization, automation, these rapid changes, we are seeing an active involvement of the tax function in these changes, because there is a business-driven change that needs to be a tax component into that. But the short answer to that is yes, and should have been there forever. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. By the way, in our opinion, it should be there all the time, in any kind of decision. Okay.
You know what? Let me. Sorry. You know when they learn? Most of the organizations, when we have the issue. So the next round, yes, they bring us at the beginning.
You have an audience here that I guess couldn't agree more with you as well. Michela, voltando para você aqui. Quais seriam os preparativos recomendados para as empresas que adotam hoje o PRL 20? É uma primeira pergunta. Acredita que as empresas terão ferramentas para suportar os novos cálculos em tempo hábil?
Com as mudanças, aí é um outro estudo, né, Durval? Acho que não teremos mais as margens fixas, então esses 20% não é algo que tem que ser atingido, né? Mas sim uma análise sim, funcional, como falamos antes, um delineamento da transação, entender onde estão os riscos, quais são as funções, onde estão os ativos, né, os intangíveis, para assim, depois de delinear a transação, começar a fazer a comparabilidade, a comparação, e ver se talvez esses 20 não sejam adequados, talvez sejam 15, sejam, dependendo do perfil, né, ou seja outra metodologia, né, mais adequada. Então, é uma outra análise, é um outro olhar agora, né, no estudo de preço de transferência. E o ferramental, sim, vamos ter que buscar os comparáveis, né, os sistemas das empresas vão ter que estar hábeis para se extrair a informação. E é um estudo aí muito mais amplo, né, dos aspectos, das características da empresa e da transação, né? Então, é um novo exercício, João.
Ok. Romero, the current intercompany pricing policy is the main driver for local losses in contracts with third parties by the Brazilian entity. This is actually a statement, sorry. The current intercompany pricing policy is the main driver for local losses in contracts with third parties by the Brazilian entity. Dutch. What would be the main consequence of this scenario under the new legislation?
It has to be compatible with the arm's length standard, basically. If this is happening, this doesn't mean to me, I'm agnostic, doesn't mean to me that is right or wrong. If the relationship between the local entity and the affiliated parties abroad triggers a loss, but the same loss would be triggered if it were an unrelated party, now you need to document that. And I think that the risk, I think this is what the question might be trying to get to. I think the risk is this. When we had a formulary method that was objective, and in applying the formulary method, I would stamp a loss as being compliant, the objectivity of the rule would enable comfort with respect to the loss. In this case, I have to document that there is a loss incurred with this intercompany setting by demonstrating that it makes sense that that loss economically would have been incurred. So now protecting the loss might be a bit more difficult because it will be more sophisticated.
And if I may also add, it needs to be done on a contemporaneous basis.
Yeah,
5 years now, you won't even remember the facts, you won't have the information to properly document that loss.
So if
But
I
then
were
again-
to...
and
I'm sorry,
just
go ahead.
an example there is, but the important thing is not to reinvent the wheel, right? Because the reality is, the question is, well, I have a distributor, and so what's normal at arm's length? Can I lose money in 1 year or two? It's a new factory, and it's going to take time to line up the manufacturing lines. How long is it going to be? Can I lose money 2 or 3? So these industry life cycles, product life cycles, are going to be really important to leverage.
And we have the other side,
in place.
right? I mean, if there's an analysis done at the other side, which demonstrates that whatever is being exported to Brazil is priced at arm's length, there's a why, there's a story. We have to understand, we have to test, we have to verify, make sure that it matches the reality of the facts and circumstances that we can observe here. But if I can perhaps put the finger on not the theoretical, but the practical concern, this will probably be a higher risk situation than if you had a profit. So because of that, it's an arm's length analysis of a company that's generating a profit, and it's generating a profit primarily in a chain with a related party, it will be scrutinized, so you have to be prepared.
So that is a real life example that is happening today in some of the distributors into Brazil. And as I said before, since the US multinationals or the foreign multinationals were not necessarily looking into the details. They were fine from Brazil perspective, from a principal perspective, was losing money.
Absolutely.
Didn't make it was okay, but now changes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna use the time that we have, lasting the 10 minutes that we have to ask to each one of you, according to each one of your panels, what would be your recommendation to this audience? In a very straight way, beginning from Horacio.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So they say, how do you eat a mammoth, a giant monster, as Romero says, and you eat it one small bite at a time? So I think the key thing, as Matias said, is let's avoid the paralysis. Let's focus on how do we move forward. And again, and we have a lot of history of this. We have these techniques, we have templates, we have materials that we can make available to you. We have, for example, we developed a few years ago the OECD Business Restructuring Audit Defense Framework, where you break it down to 3 steps. And step 1 is make sure you understand your historical transfer pricing policy on the Brazilian income tax method. Number 2, let's analyze what we're going to change or possibly change. Remember, migration of a business opportunities shouldn't be a taxable event. You can migrate risks, you can change risks. In some cases, yes, you'll need to move some tangible assets or intangible assets. So it's understand what happens in the business restructuring. And the 3rd step is, okay, how do you actually design and implement the new transfer pricing policy? And as Durval said, at the same time, you have to take care of the transition. So the transition is smooth, and then you can separate within each of the fiscal years what are your options, do it very clean in an elegant, convincing way so that you have a minimized risk going forward.
Well, he stole my line, so it's... No, don't be scared. I think it's, as I said before, and I truly mean that, there are a lot of things that we have potentially to do, but we need to do, my recommendation is don't be scared, act promptly, and connect and be open communications with particularly the inbounds or the non-Brazilian multinationals, very open and very collaborative with the home country. Because very likely they will try, as Romero said, very quickly implement cookie cutter, boom, this is our model, which is, is the natural trend, but we need to make sure that we understand the nuances and the history that is behind our operations.
I would say from a very practical standpoint, and for the people that are sitting right here with us, schedule a call with your counterparty. The good thing about transaction is that you will have a counterparty in these intercompany transactions that have already adopted the arm's length standard, and it would be good for you to see how this same operation is seen on the other side. You don't have maybe to reinvent the wheel. Maybe it's a structure that the company has put together all over the world, and it's already a good exercise to see what's already out there so that you can compare to what you may have here.
Para mim, a primeira recomendação que eu daria para todo mundo é estude. Esse assunto ele é um assunto complexo e ele vai ser um dos assuntos mais importantes agora na sua vida, enquanto gestor de área tributária, diretor financeiro de uma empresa brasileira ou de uma inbound estrangeira. Então, estude essas regras. Essas regras, elas, digamos assim, são o sangue realmente que circula dentro de qualquer multinacional. Isso é o que é de mais, como o Horácio falou, o que de mais importante existe na função fiscal. Então, realmente, familiarize-se, estude as diretrizes, estude a literatura. Ninguém precisa virar expert, os experts existem dentro dos departamentos e fora, mas familiarize-se. Esse assunto não pode ser alienígena, não é somente eventos. Dedique tempo, estude esse assunto, capacite-se, inclusive para poder ter as discussões, que são discussões de confiança, com os principais stakeholders. Por mais que os terceiros ajudem, a gente ajuda, mas existe uma relação de confiança interna que ela tem que ser preservada. E essa relação interna vai chegar um momento de olhar no olho e dizer: o que é que eu faço? O que é que eu devo fazer? E isso tem que vir de vocês. Então, para isso, vocês têm que estar preparados.
E acho que, complementando, acho que provoque esse tema internamente, né? Acho que a gente já viu agora uma cross functions dentro da empresa, que não é só, o assunto não se limita meramente ao departamento tributário, contábil, mas ele é muito mais amplo. A gente esse assunto vai além, né, do contábil tributário, mas sim a operação, a parte estratégica. Então, provoque esse tema em discussões, né, para tomada de decisão, definição de um plano de ação dentro de cada empresa.
Muito legal, obrigado. Obrigado, gente. Vamos para o almoço.